Hi everybody, welcome to IndyCar. It's the 19th of August 2019. The newspapers and social media as usual are full of different stories today, but something interesting is happening. The tone of the anti-independence, shall we say the anti-independence activists, for want of a better word, the trolls and the mainstream media and the newspapers, the tone of their attacks have changed. There's now an acceptance that the independence referendum is going ahead. Even Pamela Nash today of Scotland in Union admitted that if Scotland were to be asked a question again on its independence, she felt that the Electoral Commission should have a role in choosing the question. Now, when somebody like Pamela Nash says that and stops saying that there's no appetite for independence and that there isn't a majority for it, and is now saying that the Electoral Commission should get involved, and we now hear that the Electoral Commission itself is saying that it should start wading into the argument, you know that the writing is on the wall, because the British state is now on a full anti-independence alert. Now, they know that there's going to be a referendum and they know they can't stop that. And so the next step is to try and move the goalposts further away from the independence movement. And to do that, they think that the Electoral Commission interfering and changing the question will somehow change the outcome. They felt the last time that the Yes campaign had a more positive word to use, yes instead of no, and therefore that wasn't fair. Despite the fact that their no campaign supposedly won by quite a clear margin anyway, they're now saying that that wasn't fair. So a bit rich coming from them after having won it on a negative campaign to now start complaining that they have to campaign negatively again. So what's going on? Well, the press is full of this at the moment, that somehow or other the Electoral Commission has the right to decide what the question should be in the Scottish independence referendum. Now, this is not actually true. It's a convention under UK electoral rules that the Electoral Commission has a role in scrutinising the question, but it's not for them to set the question. It's their job basically to scrutinise it and make sure that it's fair and that it's easy to understand. And I think if you said to people, do you want Scotland to be an independent country, yes or no, that's a pretty simple and understandable question. And that is very similar to what was done in 2014, where they said, should Scotland be an independent country, yes or no? Why change the question? Because the issue is exactly the same. And the last question, if you remember, was approved by the Electoral Commission. So this is just nonsense. This is them blowing smoke and trying to make out that they have some way to control the event. And then we get more of this stuff from the unionist newspapers such as the Daily Express and the Daily Mail, who are frantically shouting that somehow or other Scotland has to get permission before it can have a referendum. And also the newspapers such as the Scotsman are full of Nicola Sturgeon's comments about how she wants to go down the route of holding a legally binding referendum using supposedly this gold standard, which nobody has ever heard Nicola actually say these words, incidentally. But somehow or other the unionist newspapers claim that this is what she said, that this is somehow the gold standard for referendums, and it has to go through the UK government and they have to give permission and blah blah blah, and so it goes on. Nicola hasn't said that as far as I know. She said she wants it to be done this way. She would prefer it to be done this way because that gives the result legitimacy, and she's obviously looking over her shoulder at Catalonia and what happened when Catalonia had a referendum which Spain then declared to be illegal because the issue of the legality hadn't been sorted out beforehand. But then again, you have to remember that Scotland isn't Catalonia. Scotland isn't in the situation that the Catalans are in with the Spanish government. Scotland is in a voluntary union, and in a voluntary union, Scotland can voluntarily say, we've had enough of this voluntary union and leave it. And we don't need permission from the UK to do that. We can still hold a perfectly legal and legitimate and democratic referendum with the same question, and probably with even better, tighter security and more scrupulous and transparent voting. And it's quite easy to do that just by changing one or two little things and making sure voters don't go astray and that ballot boxes are not moved from the polling stations. All of that can be done perfectly within the rules of the Commission without needing to even refer to them. I mean, we could refer to them, and we could say, we'd like you to rubber stamp this, but they'd find it hard to come up with any objections to the kind of security measures I'm talking about. Doing things like counting the votes in situ from the ballot boxes where they're actually, where the votes have been cast in front of witnesses, so the boxes cannot be taken away out of people's sight with no witnesses and switched or stuffed or changed in some way. I'm not saying that that's happened in the past, but I'm saying it might have happened in the previous independence referendum because the vote results were so bizarre. And frankly, the turnout was so high that it is unbelievable. It was something like 98% turnout. Now that is a world record for any referendum, and no referendum has ever even approached that number. So it was something very suspicious the last time. So this is the British government now basically wetting itself because it knows the referendum is coming and it can't stop it. It knows that Brexit is coming and it can't stop that either. So what's going to happen next? Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell are now been making these overtures to the SNP that they're not going to stand in the way of a second referendum. Now that's a clear hint that they would give a Section 30 order, because to stand in the way of a referendum would mean withholding the Section 30 order. You can read between the lines here. They are offering this as an olive branch to the SNP, who are, and let's face it, the third largest party in the UK in Parliament. Because remember, Jo Swinson does not have the third largest party, we do. So Jo Swinson has got no right to form governments or decide who forms governments or who leads them. If a deal is done with the Labour Party, and okay, nobody feels happy about doing a deal with the Labour Party with its track record of dishonesty in the past, but if it gets us across the line and it gets us a Section 30 order, I think most of us would do a deal with the devil to get that. And also if it helps to stop the no-deal Brexit that everybody fears, it can't be a bad thing. Remember, Brexit is not going to be stopped. Just the no-deal part of it is going to be stopped. Brexit will still go ahead. It will still hurt Scotland. It will still cost tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of jobs. So the future's not going to change. It's just not going to happen fast. So there is still going to be time to have a referendum if no deal is called off. The question now is, will the Labour Party come clean and actually offer a Section 30 order and come out in public and say that? If they do that, then I think we'll have the full support of the SNP and most of us as well to stop their no-deal Brexit, to oust Boris Johnson, get rid of him for good, to stop the possibility of on the streets and civil unrest, medicine shortages, people dying, lack of food, lack of fuel, blackouts, all the rest of it, all the things that we haven't seen since World War II or the 1970s returning to haunt us again. That's what Boris Johnson is threatening. The European Union is not going to back down because they have absolutely nothing to gain from backing down. They have everything to gain from saying to Boris Johnson, we're not going to change the deal. The only way out of the European Union with the deal is if you accept the deal which your party negotiated with us last year, because Theresa May negotiated a deal. It's not the best deal in the world, but that's because the British put so many red lines in the way. It's the only deal you could do. So if we want to slide out of the European Union in a nice, orderly fashion with the 21-month sort of getting used to period where everything can readjust and without this cliff edge and chaos that we're talking about, then we'll have to have this deal that's already on offer. I mean, there's nothing actually wrong with it. The backstop was really just to make sure the British government came up with a way of solving the Irish border issue at some point, and that still has to happen anyway. So from any viewpoint of sanity, and I'm talking about people who are not the Tory party and not Brexiteers, but anyone who is sane can see that there's only one way for the UK to leave the European Union, and that is with the deal that the UK has already negotiated, keeping the island of Ireland border free, and also respecting that forever afterwards, so that Ireland can be peaceful, and so that the United Kingdom can exit the European Union without the cliff edge and without riots on the streets and disorder and unrest. From Scotland's point of view, it does not change the outcome for us, because Brexit of any kind will be bad for Scotland, because we have a mixed economy with a large proportion of our foreign income which is earned obviously from exporting. That's why Scotland is always in the black and is the only part of the United Kingdom which is not in debt. And if we want to remain that way, then we have to leave the UK. Otherwise, we will be dragged under the enormous debt burden that the Tories have already crippled the United Kingdom with. So we have to leave. The question really is just how we leave. Nicola believes it will be impossible for the UK parties to not give us this referendum and to not give us the Section 30 order. And we're seeing that beginning to happen now with Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell. There's a way to go yet before any of this happens. We've got to wait obviously for Westminster to come back. There were talks of it being recalled as an emergency with 100 MPs signing a letter demanding that Boris Johnson recall Parliament early to deal with the emergency, and of course Boris Johnson's not going to do that. So we'll be back on the 3rd, and there will be an instant vote of no confidence in the government. The government will probably lose it. Then there'll be a 2-week period while Boris Johnson tries to figure out a way of regaining the confidence of Parliament, which he probably will not manage to do, and then he will go and there'll be a general election in November. And November is the expected time for the general election to happen at the moment. From the spies that I have around the place are telling me that in other parties they expect there to be a general election around the middle part of November, say somewhere around the 7th of November. And the 7th of November is the time that they guess this general election will happen. And if that happens and a kind of unity government is formed between the SNP, between the Labour Party, the SNP and perhaps the Greens and one or two other disaffected Tories, then so be it. And that will be the price that we will pay for the Section 30 order, is to be a part of that government which will caretake the UK while something is sorted out with the European Union, which is not a no deal. The question then is when to have the referendum. At the moment it looks likely that it will still be next year sometime, but these things are fluid, and as I say, the SNP is moving everything up. They will be ready, I believe, for basically to announce a referendum before the end of this year. In fact, I think it will be a long way before the end of this year. They may even be ready to announce the date of a referendum before this general election actually happens. And it might be that they could make the general election also about independence and a further mandate. Who knows? But all of the stars are beginning to line up and all of the pieces are beginning to fall into place. And the British state under the Tories at the moment is doing its level best to throw as many hurdles in the way as possible. But they don't have much left to fight with. And I think the way things are looking, the tide has swung the other way now. And we saw in Aberdeen just how much it is when a force for good were portrayed by the Press and Journal as having over 2,000 people at a counter demonstration when there was only 20 of them. So the newspaper, the Press and Journal, absolutely outright lying about the numbers of unionist counter-protesters in Aberdeen. This is how desperate it's got. Nobody's announced a referendum yet, and already they're scrabbling around. It will get worse before it gets better. The lies will get bigger. The press will come out with more outrageous nonsense than ever before. And we have to just grit our teeth and keep going, because that's what it's going to take to get to the end of this process. We need to get that unity government in place, and we need to get that Section 30 order secured and vote, and we need to do it as soon as possible. But it's getting there. It's the forces are all beginning to align themselves in one direction now, and it's anti-no deal, it's anti-Tory, and to a large extent it's pro-Labour in England and pro-independence in Scotland, and that's the way it should be. That's the way it always should be. I'll see you later. I'll talk again to you tomorrow. I'll be hosting Scotland at 7 this evening. I don't know who the guests are tonight, but I'll see you on Scotland at 7 tonight on YouTube and on live stream, and you can catch up later on YouTube if you like. See you later. Bye bye.